The peaceful Jameson family life in small-town Maplewood was about to be upended. Mary, a beloved spouse and pillar of the neighborhood, became ill. She was not only fighting her disease, as it would soon become clear, but also uncovering a network of deceit and ulterior motives inside her family. One day, as she was working at the neighborhood bakery, she suddenly lost her balance and fell to the ground. When attempting to get in touch with her spouse, William, her co-workers were unsuccessful. He raced to the hospital to find his wife as soon as he heard their voicemails. But why didn't he answer the initial call? William had sworn to support her no matter what that day, and William seemed like a loving caregiver from the outside. But Mary soon began to worry that promises were broken and that nothing was as it seemed. William's visits also decreased as Mary's condition deteriorated. It proved to be the beginning of a mystery that would permanently alter their lives and cast doubt on their conceptions of love, loyalty, and what it really meant to say, "Till death do us part." Mary had suddenly been ill, leaving doctors baffled as to what was causing her unusual disease, but none of them could identify it at the nearby hospital. All they knew was that Mary's strength was ebbing day by day. Mary made an effort to maintain her upbeat attitude and would frequently say, "This is just another hurdle. We'll get through it together, William." And in those initial days, William was the perfect example of a devoted spouse. He would read aloud from her favorite novels for hours by her bed, or he would bring her flowers. But things will soon take a turn for the worst with him. Despite his attendance for her the first 2 days, on day 3, William just stopped by for a quick drive-by, and in the days that followed, his presence became even less regular. When Mary first observed the shift, she blamed work stress. "He's making an effort," she would comfort her anxious sister. "He's simply exhausted, that's all." But in her heart of hearts, she was also pretty concerned. Even though she was sick, Mary couldn't deny the unsettling sense of isolation that started to consume her. She couldn't handle this on her alone. She needed her spouse's support. However, the indicators were there. Nearly all of her calls went unanswered, and William's eyes, which had been filled with concern on the first day, suddenly appeared distant. The doubts began to mount. In reality, what was happening? Mary surmised that William might be missing their easygoing banter and closeness now that Mary's illness has taken center stage for the past few days. In the hopes that it might reignite the flame, she planned a little date night back at the hospital. William, however, had to cancel at the last minute, saying, "I'm sorry, but I really need to stay at the office. There's an urgent matter with this big client." Meals and comfort were brought by friends and neighbors during their visits. They expected William to be by Mary's side during every waking moment, therefore they would inquire as to where he was. He appeared to cherish his wife at all times, even turning up for work, because he would become upset if she was gone for even a few hours. Mary attempted to fake a smile and provide them a hazy explanation, but she was just as perplexed by it. Mary saw the struggle in William's eyes. Their happy marriage seemed to be weighing on him now. He was visibly torn and yearned for a life different from theirs, one free of the hardships they were going through. Mary struggled with an incomprehensible decision as she felt him slipping away. Although she was aware that he was at a fork in the road, she was unable to foresee his decision. As William would soon discover, secrets were difficult to maintain in a small community like Maplewood. Mary's sister Sabine would discover a devastating fact that validated her concerns. She saw William, who was conversing with a woman at a nearby cafe, sitting a little too close to her and even leaning in to kiss her. Was that what she saw? Sabine had to tell Mary about the discovery, which would destroy her sister, even if she wasn't sure if it was a peck on the cheek or on the lips. With a sorrowful heart, Sabine went to see Mary. Sabine feared that since Mary was already fighting her illness, this may be the last blow and that she would lose all hope. "It's important for you to know," Sabine started, her words bearing a strong impact on the quiet chamber. "The time has come to face the truth." Mary listened in her bedroom while Sabine described her discovery. She felt a wave of disbelief and denial that soon turned into a burning anguish. Her world crumbled when she realized how dishonest William really was. Furious rage replaced the hurt. Sick in bed, But furious at William's betrayal, Mary muttered a promise to exact retribution. Sabine was deeply uncomfortable as she watched this change. Mary's once caring eyes were beginning to flash with something darker. How far would Mary go to defend herself and chastise William, and what would she do?
Mary put William to the test when he came around again, thinking he would confess. When talking to her sister about her strategy, she said, "He owes me that much, at least." She smiled warmly at him and mentioned in passing Sabine's sighting at the cafe, hoping for an honest response. However, William responded indifferently, hiding nothing with his expression. Mary became frustrated when she realized he wouldn't voluntarily admit anything. Her strategy, which was to gently extract the truth from him, had not worked. Her desire for retribution only grew stronger as William shrugged indifferently in response to her pointed query. His unintelligible face confirmed his doom in her scheme. It was time for her to take action on her own. That evening at supper, Mary gently followed up with hints about her sister's cafe sighting once more. William tensed up, dismissing it as a friendly get-together. "You wouldn't recognize her because she works there," William continued. Mary's patience was becoming thin as a result of his avoidance. The conversations became strained, filled with unspoken accusations and silent pleadings. The following night, it escalated. William hadn't been there all day, and Mary decided to be more direct, having grown desperate. "Just tell me the truth," Mary implored, her voice cracking with desperation. She couldn't believe what was really going on. Finally, in a moment of heated argument, Mary's pent-up emotions exploded. "Just leave if you're going to lie," she screamed, her voice echoing through the entire hospital's hallway. William, looking defeated, grabbed his coat and walked out the door. The slamming door was a grim punctuation to their crumbling marriage. Alone, Mary's intention hardened. His departure, without a confession or apology, made her decision clear. Revenge wasn't just a fleeting thought anymore, it was a plan taking shape. William's silence had sealed his fate in her eyes, fueling her determination for retribution. Mary would make sure he wouldn't be able to see what was coming for him. And that turned out to become a reality soon. In the quiet hospital room, Mary's loneliness grew. She replayed their final argument, each word deepening her sense of betrayal. She had hoped he would confess and they could find a way forward, but now he left her no choice. The man she loved had become a stranger, his lies and evasions echoing in her mind. Her heart ached with the reality of his abandonment. As days passed, loneliness turned to anger. Mary stared out the window, lost in thoughts of William's deceit. She felt cheated. Her sickness was magnified by his neglect. The pain of being forgotten was worse than any illness, fueling a growing desire for retribution. How could he do this to her? Her thoughts increasingly turned to revenge. Lying in her bed, Mary began plotting ways to make William pay for his betrayal. The idea consumed her, transforming her despair into a focused resolve. What had once been a loving heart, filled with happy memories of her husband, was now longing for justice, wishing him nothing but the worst. Mary's plans for revenge became her solace in her small hospital room, filling the emptiness left by William's departure. She visualized various scenarios, each more satisfying than the last. The notion of making him regret his actions gave her strength, replacing the love that had turned to bitter resentment. She was ready to confront him. After another night of festering anger and meticulous planning, the day of confrontation arrived. William, unaware of the storm brewing inside Mary, visited the hospital under the guise of concern. His feigned empathy was met with a steely gaze from Mary, who had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind while she lay awake. "Mary, I've been thinking about us," William stumbledly said, averting his eyes. Mary could see straight through the practiced earnestness and combination of remorse in his voice. He was interrupted by her, saying, "William, you're not allowed to talk about us anymore." She said, "Us ended the moment you chose someone else over your sick wife." William's expression wavered, his pretended concern disintegrating. "It's not what you think, Mary." "I was only," he began, but Mary interrupted. "William, save it." Her gaze met his as she shot back. "I know everything. I am aware of the other woman, your deceit, and your act of indifference while you left me behind." For a moment, William looked like he might argue, but then his shoulders slumped, defeated. "I'm sorry, Mary. I never meant to hurt you." Mary shook her head slowly. "Your apologies mean nothing now. You've shown me exactly who you are. I don't need your pity or your sorry excuses. What I need is for you to understand the pain you've caused." And Mary would make sure he would feel her pain soon. There was a heavy silence as William looked at her, a mix of regret and confusion in his eyes. He had no words, no excuses left, so Mary continued, her voice now a whisper, but every word filled with determined clarity. "I want you to leave, William, and don't come back. I will get better. I will move on, but not with you in my life." As William stood up, he realized the Mary he knew, the loving, forgiving wife, was no longer there. In her place stood a woman forged by betrayal and pain, stronger and more determined than he had ever known her to be. Without another word, William turned and left the room. This wouldn't be the last time Mary would make him suffer. She would make sure of that. Confined to her hospital bed, Mary's mind was far from idle. The loneliness and emptiness of her room sharpened her focus on her plan for revenge. During a long, uneventful afternoon, she decided to reach out to a lawyer despite her illness. Mary discreetly arranged for a lawyer to visit her, under the guise of discussing her will and other routine matters. Harold Jenkins, known for his discretion and wisdom, was her choice. His arrival at the hospital was inconspicuous. To any observer, he was just another visitor. In the privacy of her room, with the door shut, Mary revealed her true intentions. She spoke almost in a whisper, ensuring the hospital staff outside couldn't overhear her. She laid out the broad strokes of her plan, emphasizing the need for secrecy. Jenkins, well accustomed to unusual requests, found Mary's case unique. She was more than a woman scorned. She was visibly weakened by illness. This complexity added challenges to providing legal advice, but Jenkins was determined to assist. As their meeting ended, Jenkins reassured Mary of his confidentiality. He left with a folder full of notes, cleverly concealed among mundane paperwork, to hide their conversation's true nature. In the following days, Mary's sense of purpose was renewed. Confined to her bed, she had set her plan in motion. This bitter satisfaction made her hospital stay slightly more bearable. Unbeknownst to William, he was about to be caught in a web of her making. As Mary's stay in the hospital went on for longer, her interactions with her lawyer grew more frequent and secretive. Even though Mary was bedridden, she meticulously orchestrated changes to her will and finances. Each adjustment severed another tie with William. The lawyer, though initially puzzled by the extent of these changes, complied without questioning Mary too much. Jenkins understood Mary's need for revenge and didn't want to cause a sick woman who was just abandoned by her husband any more grief than she was already facing. But he kept wondering, what was Mary's plan? During her hospital visits, Mary detailed her plan to her lawyer. Each secret meeting added a new aspect to her scheme. Her lawyer, often startled, followed her instructions. To an outsider, these looked like normal legal meetings, but they were key to her secret plot. At the same time, Mary pretended to be getting sicker. Nurses and doctors, unknowingly part of her secret plan, relayed updates to William. Each report seemed grimmer. Mary's energy was fading, her responses slower, and her health seemingly spiraling downward. To William, this was evidence of her diminishing strength, not realizing it was all an elaborate facade to mask her true intentions. In the meantime, Mary's tactics became more tricky and intricate. She subtly sowed seeds of doubt in William's mind about his new relationship, using her weakened state to her full advantage. A lingering look here, a half-whispered sentence there, a seemingly innocent question, all carefully designed to instigate uncertainty. Moreover, she manipulated the town's perception of William, painting him as a neglectful husband. Gradually, she swayed public opinion in her favor, and William started to feel the effects of it. Casual greetings turned distant, social invitations ceased, and whispers followed him. William knew something was up, but couldn't quite grasp the extent of it. But not for much longer, as it would turn out. The full extent of Mary's plan was tantalizingly out of reach for William. The plot thickened when a bewildered and distressed William confronted Mary in her hospital room. "What is going on, Mary? Tell me. You can't do this to me," he yelled at her, completely unaware of the irony of the situation. She told him parts of her plan, letting him believe he understood the full scope of her revenge. "I'm just taking care of some financial stuff. I want to make sure everything is in order for when I'm gone. You can't blame me for taking care of myself after what you've done, William," she hissed in response. Mary, the master strategist, withheld the most critical and shocking part of her plan. Lying in the hospital bed, Mary gazed through the window, her thoughts racing through her mind. She could feel the warmth of the town's sympathy, a sharp contrast to William's abandonment. "They're starting to see the truth," she whispered to herself, a faint smile crossing her lips. Her plan was working. During the nurse's visit, Mary shared her worries with her, with a hint of strategy. "I can barely handle the loneliness, Emily," she said softly, seeking to protect her facade of fragility. Emily, concerned, replied, "We're all here for you, Mary. Don't worry." Mary's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, a blend of genuine pain and calculated manipulation. One day, William showed up at the hospital, marking a pivotal moment. Holding the bouquet awkwardly, he looked like a complete stranger to her. "Why now, William? Do you think flowers can fix anything?" Mary asked, her voice a mix of weakness and repressed anger. As if he would ever come here without an ulterior motive, she thought. William's hesitation and discomfort were palpable to Mary. I'm just worried about you," he stammered. "I wanted to know how you were doing now. See you with my own two eyes, instead of only hearing about it from the nurses." Mary turned her head away, her heart hardening. Too little, too late, she thought. In her conversations with Jenkins, Mary's lawyer, she maintained a tone of determination. "We must proceed as planned, Harold. He needs to understand what betrayal feels like," she said during one of their phone calls. She could hear the hesitation in his voice. Jenkins, though conflicted, replied, "I trust your judgment, Mary, but this is quite an undertaking." Mary, feeling the grip of her illness but empowered by her resolve, asserted, "I've never been more certain." Her revenge was all the reassurance she needed. The truth would soon be revealed. Mary felt a surge of bitter satisfaction as she heard about William's failed attempts to reconnect with friends. "He's feeling isolated now? It's just a taste of what I've endured," she thought. On the phone, she heard John's distant voice echoing the town's sentiments. "He deserves this. He needs to feel this," she murmured. Every day, Mary refined her plan, her mind working tirelessly. She knew her moves had to be precise, her image carefully curated to sway public opinion. From her hospital bed, she directed her chess pieces with a deft hand, each move bringing her closer to the checkmate she so deeply desired. Then one day, in her hospital room, Mary picked up her phone, her expression focused and determined. She had planned this moment carefully. "It's time," she said into the phone. "Release the information about my condition worsening and include that rumor about William expressing regret over leaving me." She knew the impact this would have on the town's view of both her and William. This carefully orchestrated leak was the final piece needed to set the stage for her grand revelation. As she ended the call, Mary lay back, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd just set in motion. Meanwhile, William found himself in his sister Sarah's living room. The room was cozy, a stark contrast to the cold, unwelcoming atmosphere he'd been encountering in town. "Sarah, I'm not sure what to do anymore," he admitted, looking lost and vulnerable. "Everyone's turned against me. And now, with Mary getting worse, I'm starting to question if I made the right decision." Sarah listened, her face a mix of empathy and concern. William's confession revealed the toll the situation was taking on him and the doubts and fears now surfacing. He was beginning to doubt his own decisions. Back in the hospital, Mary sat in silence. The room was quiet except for the occasional beep of the heart monitor. She had been planning and plotting for so long, and now everything was in place. This period of calm before the storm was almost surreal. She reflected on the journey that brought her here, the decisions she had made, and the repercussions they would soon bring. In this moment of solitude, she felt a strange sense of peace. She was ready for what was to come. The final act of her plan was about to unfold, and she was prepared to see it through to its conclusion. In the subdued light of Mary's hospital room, William, looking for a pen to leave a note during an unannounced visit, rummaged through the drawer of her bedside table. Amid the clutter of personal items, his fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper. His curiosity piqued, and he unfolded it, his eyes scanning the content. The note, seemingly benign, was from Mary's cousin Jane, but a line caught William's attention. "I'm glad to hear the treatment is working better than expected." The words didn't align with the grim picture of Mary's health that he'd been given. Confusion knitted his brow as he reread the sentence. This small inconsistency planted a seed of suspicion in his mind. Could there be more to Mary's condition than meets the eye? William couldn't make sense of the note. It was too vague and left more questions than answers. It suggested there was more to Mary's condition than he knew, but he couldn't figure out what. Frustrated, this small piece of evidence only added to the mystery surrounding her health. With the note in his pocket, William left feeling more confused than ever. It hinted at something important but revealed little. He found himself stuck with more doubts and fewer answers. The note, far from helping, had only deepened the puzzle about Mary's true state. What was really going on? The hospital room, where so much of Mary's plan had been set into motion, became the stage for the final act of her elaborate scheme. William, still reeling from the partial truths Mary had fed him, was about to face the most shattering revelation of all. As William entered the room the day after he found the note, expecting to see his weakened ex-wife, he was met with a sight that left him speechless. Mary, far from the fragile figure he had been conditioned to see, stood before him, the very picture of health. Her newfound strength was evident, yet it wasn't a complete fabrication. The illness had been real, but Mary's recovery was swifter and more complete than anyone, especially William, had anticipated. William was shocked when he saw Mary so lively and healthy again. "Mary, you, how?" William stammered, his face a mask of shock. Mary's voice, once weak and tremulous, was now firm and clear. "My illness was real, William, but so was my determination to overcome it. And in doing so, I unveiled your true nature and orchestrated justice for myself." Her tone was as steady as her gaze, unwavering and strong. William's expression switched from confusion to horror as he realized the depth of Mary's resilience and strategic planning. While she fought her illness, she had also been silently working to secure her future legally and financially, distancing herself from William, ensuring he could never benefit from his betrayal or her vulnerability. "Why would you do this?" William's voice was barely a whisper, laden with a mix of betrayal and dawning understanding. "Because you abandoned me at my weakest," Mary replied, her resolve unshaken. "It wasn't just to expose your disloyalty. It was to protect myself from someone who saw my illness as an opportunity rather than a tragedy." The extent of her plan was undeniable. William was left not only emotionally shattered, but also legally and financially isolated. Mary had turned her personal crisis into a powerful move for self-preservation and retribution. As the weight of reality dawned on William, he saw not just the sick wife he had underestimated, but the mastermind of his comeuppance. Mary, with one final look of indomitable strength, walked away, leaving the remnants of William's misconceptions behind. During her last day at the hospital, Mary looked back on her journey. Diagnosed with a serious illness, she felt betrayed by William's departure. But instead of succumbing to despair, she turned her situation into a chance for empowerment. Each day, her resolve to show William's true colors strengthened. As her health gradually improved, Mary meticulously planned each step. She used her visits to the lawyer to strategically rearrange her assets and legal standing. These moves were calculated, ensuring William couldn't benefit from his betrayal or her vulnerability, a fitting retribution for his abandonment. Mary carefully manipulated public perception, leaking information and playing the part of the weakened wife to perfection. This wasn't just a ploy for sympathy. It was a strategic act to isolate William socially and emotionally. Her tactics were precise, with each step drawing her closer to her goal. The day William found the note, Mary knew her plan was nearing its climax. That piece of paper, innocently left where he could find it, was the final nudge. It was meant to sow doubt and start unraveling the web of lies she had crafted around her illness. When William entered the hospital room, expecting to find a frail figure, Mary stood strong and healthy. She watched his shock with a sense of vindication. She had been underestimated, but now she has revealed her true strength, both physically and mentally. Her illness had been real, but so was her resilience. Mary's last words to William were clear and unemotional. She had risen from her weakest point to turn the tables. As she walked away, leaving William to face the consequences of his actions, she felt a weight lift. Her fight was over. She had secured her future and reclaimed her dignity.